Why are you wearing a mask?
You have to wear a mask inside, my friend. Yeah,
No problem for me. But if you have a mask and there's no one else here, we okay?
yeah, we're okay.
Okay.
Okay, so Lori, would you like to start things off, or would you like me to say a few words, or?
Actually, if you could, that would be great. I can't find the email with the introduction piece.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Van Dorn. I think I know all of you on the call. We have a great speaker today, Becky Hopkins, Assistant City Manager with the City of Pleasanton. I asked her to speak to us because I saw most of her presentation for their action plan and with the City Council. I was sort of taken aback as to all the implementation that's going to be required for this SB 1383, and I thought it was important that our business community, as well as our community overall, got a chance to see what it is going to entail in the coming years. So it's a big, robust program that I think we need to stay on top of and make sure we communicate it to our businesses. So I'm really happy to have Becky here. This is our 2025 forum, and Becky, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here with you this morning. Like Steve said, this is a big piece of legislation and complex. And so what I wanted to do was review a little bit of what our current requirements for mandatory recycling is in Pleasanton, and then give you some background on the new law that will go into effect in January, and try to give you a picture of what that means for businesses. So right now we have a mandatory recycling in Alameda County, which is done through an ordinance through the Alameda County Waste Authority, Management Authority, which is also known as Stop Waste. And Pleasanton opted into phase 1 of this in 2013. So this was just for mixed recycling, which included for commercial accounts with 4 cubic yards of solid waste a week. And so many of your businesses already have this in place. This is not going to be a new piece for them. One thing that we've done recently with Pleasanton Garbage is we've offered 96-gallon carts in solid waste, mixed recycling, and organics to help for those businesses that maybe don't have the volume or also have space constraints. So that's something that we've tried to implement to help people comply with the mandatory recycling. In 2013, Pleasanton opted into the organics part of the county's mandatory recycling ordinance. And this requires businesses that generate significant quantities of organics to have organic service. What that means is, it's a good diagram, 20 gallons of food scraps would equal significant need for organic service. 20 gallons of food scraps or other organic waste like plant material. So think 4 to 5 gallon buckets. So that's been in place for a while, and Alameda County Management Waste Authority, Stop Waste, has done for us has done the compliance requirements. So you as a business may receive an administrative notice reminding you of the requirements if you don't have the service, and encouraging you to sign up for the service through Pleasanton Garbage. They also do inspections and actually go out and flip lids, and we'll find someone if there is in your garbage, if there is mixed recycling or organic materials, a significant amount, you could receive a fine for that. The same with looking in the mixed recycling. If there's anything that's not supposed to be in there, you could be fined for that. And so they have worked with the city to provide that for us. So in effect, in a way, we already have some of the infrastructure in place for this. Some of the businesses are used to this. What's the real significant change with SB 1383 is it requires all these 3 streams to be mandatory for all businesses, with some very small exceptions. this law was passed in 2018 or 2016, and it's really a climate action bill that was focused on reducing organic waste going to the landfill. And so the goal is by 2025 that there would be a statewide reduction of 75% of organic waste material going to the landfill. Another unique component to this is an edible food recovery component. This will impact some businesses, which I'll go over in a little later in the presentation. But this is another big new kind of piece that will definitely have an impact moving forward. So this is just a brief timeline. Basically, I'll go over the different components that the city, what really is changed in this law is cities will be held legally responsible to make sure that each component of this bill is enforced and that the programs required are in place. And cities can be fined up to $10,000 a day for noncompliance. So there's a lot of teeth in this law where past regulations that have been passed haven't had that kind of financial penalty. So we have a lot to do between, we have a lot to do between now and the beginning of the year. This shows the different areas that the city has to address. Our collection and processing of all three of the streams. Monitoring and enforcement, the city will have to ensure that all residential and commercial clients have subscribed to all three streams of service. And in 2024, we will have to start doing enforcement for noncompliance of subscription service. So that will include administrative fines, inspections, both of residential and commercial routes, which we've been doing commercial, but the residential piece will be new for us as well. The city will be required to procure organic material requirements to meet state quotas. So they've come up with a per capita allocation of mulch and compost that the city is going to have to procure and apply. The amount is really significant. The cost is going to be up to $250,000 annually. And this is not something that we can pass on to our ratepayers. It will have to come from the city's general fund. So this is a big unfunded mandate for the city that we're trying to figure out how we're going to meet, as well as the market is not going to have enough product for us to procure. So it's going to be an interesting, we just don't have enough facilities to process all the materials to create the product for us to procure right now in California. The city is required to pass an ordinance that adopts all the regulations for SB 1383, and that has to be in effect and in place in January. What's great about this is we will be having a county-wide ordinance like we currently do through Stop Waste that the city will be opting into, and we're in process of finalizing that and hope to bring that to council late September, early October for adoption. And I mentioned the edible food recovery. Fortunately, Stop Waste is taking the lead on this for member agencies. And then Alameda County Health will be conducting the inspections on our behalf, as they are already going to restaurants in these locations to do inspections to make sure that they are doing the food recovery component that they're required to by law. Education and outreach is a huge piece to this. We will be doing, beginning in October, late September, October, we'll begin our outreach, our formal outreach to both commercial and residential businesses. We have employed Go Green Initiative, and their summer interns to create much of this material that we'll be using for our public education and outreach. So that's been a great partnership to get our youth involved in creating some great outreach materials for us. The record keeping and reporting requirements are quite extensive. This is actually going to probably take one full-time equivalent of a person that the city's going to have to hire to meet this requirement. There is a requirement for capacity planning. This is in regards to ensuring that we have not only enough facility space and programs, but also that we have enough contractors that can provide the edible food recovery component to us. There's not that many nonprofits or businesses that do this work in the Tri-Valley, and so it'll be the city's responsibility to either do an RFQ, RFP if we can't, to make sure that there's enough resources for businesses to comply. So that will be the city's responsibility. And then in regards to self-haul, the city already has an ordinance allowing self-hauling. This is going to be updated and modified to comply with the new law as well. So self-haul is allowed for both commercial and residential. So how is this going to impact you as businesses? Really simply, subscription to all three containers, all three services are going to be required. And there is an exemption process, but it is really for space constraints and de minimis waiver. That process is going to be conducted through Stop Waste in collaboration with the city. And so as that program that gets finalized, information will be available on the city's website, as well as Stop Waste is creating a whole new business website to help businesses know how to comply with SB 1383 and have resources available. So like I mentioned, these are the requirements for businesses. You need to subscribe or participate in our curbside collection, or you need to arrange for self-haul. And self-haul is a two-step process in Pleasanton. We have a permit that you must apply for, and then as well as you must have a certification from Stop Waste. So it's a two-step process, but that is allowable. It may be easier for some business to self-haul instead of having a subscription service. And then businesses must provide collection containers for organic waste and recyclables in all areas where disposable containers are provided for customers, except in the restrooms. So this is going to impact primarily restaurants and other businesses that have kind of a front of house where they're going to have to provide the three streams and appropriate signage for the community to properly sort their recyclables. The law stipulates even the color of the containers and the type of signage, which we'll have available. We'll have the signage, and businesses will be able to apply for bins through Stop Waste. The colors are black for solid waste, green for organic materials, and blue for recycling. So that will be a definite change for some businesses. And there is some leeway in compliance to the color requirements. It's really meant to, you have till 2036 to make sure that all of your bins meet the color requirements. So replacing them as you need with the right color and the labeling. Stop Waste and the city are working together on the labeling requirements. So PGS will have those available for businesses later this year, actually, to start relabeling their bins, internal bins, as well as their dumpsters. Businesses will be responsible to ensure that to reduce contamination in the streams by educating employees, any contractors or tenants and customers regarding how to properly sort their organic materials into the correct containers. So that means that you need to, inspect occasionally to make sure that your employees are doing what they need to do, and then making sure you have appropriate signage, especially in front of house. And our Pleasanton Garbage Service, as well as Stop Waste, will be providing technical assistance to businesses who need to provide that education for employees, as well as the city will have video on demand resources to help educate and inform employees on how to properly sort the materials in the containers. And like I said, there's an annual education requirement, which could be just providing a flyer or some sort of stand-up education around recycling. So the edible food recovery program is broken up into 2 stages, Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 will be effective January 1st, and it includes supermarkets, grocery stores, food service providers, food distributors, and wholesale food vendors. What this is going to require is for these businesses to have contracts with organizations that recover food, and samples of these contracts will be made available, and outreach to these organizations will be occurring by Stop Waste soon to ensure that they know what they need to do and how to comply. And then some other requirements, reporting requirements, they need to be able to provide proof to the city when we come and ask to see those contracts, and to ensure that they have that in place to properly donate food that is edible. Many of the supermarkets and larger grocery stores already backhaul and have some sort of contracts in place. What we're really, I think, going to see, and will provide a lot of education and support, is for Tier 2, when it starts impacting restaurants and hotels and large event venues when this goes into place. So we have a little time to work on building our infrastructure of providers to redeploy that food to good use in our community. And just a side note on this, because of the pandemic, we've had a regional food distribution center operating at the Pleasanton Fairgrounds. I'm not sure if you all have been aware of that. It's been on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we've had over 700 families every week getting food through that distribution. And more than 40% of those are Pleasanton residents. That was very surprising to us. We didn't realize there was that much food insecurity in Pleasanton. So this is a need, and this is infrastructure that needs to be put in place to make sure that everyone is not food insecure and has good, healthy food, and not have this food go to good use and not go to waste. So the big question is, what is it going to cost? I mentioned there's all these requirements are going to require the city to hire or contract with additional staff. We're looking at needing to hire a program coordinator, probably an analyst. And as we look at enforcement and inspection, we, depending on whether we're going to contract that out or do that in-house, that piece will need some staffing support as well. So we're looking at probably needing to add 3 to 5 FTE equivalent over the next few years. If you look at the high-low cost, this is the anticipated annual cost over the next few years. And when we get to 2024, when we start the enforcement piece, we're looking at a potential $1.2 million cost just for the city. These are only the city anticipated costs. This is not the additional costs that the hauler, PGS, is going to have to incur to comply with this law. So this is substantial. Like I mentioned, a portion of this is for that procurement piece. The other amount may be passed on to the ratepayers. That's a decision of the council. We are entering negotiations with PGS now to look at the SB 1383 costs and figure out what it's going to cost. And then we'll be bringing cost analysis and proposal to the council to decide what's going to get passed on to the ratepayers and what the city is going to pay from their general fund. So we our next steps for the city is we've adopted the action plan that Steve mentioned. It goes into each of those category areas with detailed plans of how we're going to comply by the beginning of the year. We'll be bringing forth we're drafting the ordinance right now, and we'll be bringing it forward to the council. It will have to go through, ordinances go through at least 2 meetings, if not 3, to be finalized. And we're updating the city's purchasing policy to address the procurement requirement. So that will have to go to council as well. We're negotiating an amendment to the franchise agreement for this mandatory service. We have a really good franchise agreement in that it's very constrained fiscally in regards to what can be discussed. So this is a change of law. And so under the provision of the contract, the discussion can only be around things that have direct correlation to the change of law. No other items can be discussed. So that will constrain the cost to just what it's going to, the additional cost of SB 1383. When we negotiated the contract and signed it in 2018, there were draft regulations of SB 1383 already published. So we took what was existing at that time already and folded that in to the existing contract. So one of the steps that we've done is we did a gap analysis of the franchise agreement to basically highlight the areas that need to be addressed. So it will be constrained negotiation. It will be only focused on costs related to this. Our consultant estimates it could be anywhere between 3 and 7% increase of current costs. We just don't know until we get the cost analysis from the company and negotiate. And then, like I said, it's a policy decision for the council how they choose to pay for it. We will be needing to deal with record keeping and monitoring. We're going to be procuring a software system to help us do that. Like I said, I can't even go into all the detail of the stuff we have to provide to the state. And we have to have things accessible within 10 days for the state to be able to review. So we need to have a good process in place and database system in place. So we're already working on that as well. I mentioned that we'll be doing our public education campaign and look forward to working with all of you on educating your members of the chamber, and then we'll be hiring staff as needed. The program goes into effect in 2022. We know that the mandatory collection requirement, we're just so that you know, PGS isn't going to be dropping off bins and charging everybody for it beginning January 1st. We know that it's going to be a process getting everybody compliant. But we have to have everything in place ready to go by January 1st, 2022. So our goal is obviously in that first year to get everybody subscribed to the required service. And then as we move on, we'll just be implementing the program in 2024. Like I said, the big piece will be having to do the tier 2 food generator and then start doing enforcement and assessing penalties and notice of violations to non-compliant generators or businesses who have not subscribed to service or residents. And then we'll just be continuing to move on with implementing the program. I mentioned waivers, and those are only good for 5 years. And so that will be a process that will have to be reevaluated in 2025 as well, as to whether waivers will be given again for any of the businesses that receive an exemption. So that was a lot of information, and I'm thank you for your attention, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Becky. Really well done, and just you're right. It's a lot of information. So it seems to me a lot of this is going to be based on communication and consistent communication to obviously the residents and the businesses. So are there any questions from anybody?
Yeah, I've got a question. Becky, can you explain a little bit more about the procurement? Either my brain turned off or I didn't understand. What does that mean?
So the state wanted to create, by diverting the organics from the landfill, they wanted to create a market for those organics to be purchased and for them to go to good use. And so in an effort to do that, they've mandated that each jurisdiction they created a formula. It's a per capita formula. So it's so many tons of organic material that has to be purchased by each city to meet that requirement. And with the idea that it will create a market for that material, the challenge is right now, and Jill could probably speak eloquently to this, is that we don't have the facility space in the state to process all this new organic material. And it takes anywhere from 3 to, oh my goodness, 3 to 5, more likely 7 to 10 years to site a new facility. And so, and it's very costly, and the permitting process, it's not just state permitting, but local permitting as well. And so what we're going to see happen is that there is an RNG allowance, but there's in the Bay Area, in our area, it's very prescribed of what type of RNG we can purchase. It has to come from organic matter. And there's really no source in the Bay Area for us to purchase that from right now. And so until that market's developed, that's not an option for us. So the city has to purchase compost and mulch. And the law has specific regulations in regards to where we can purchase it. It has to be a certain standard and level of quality of material. So this is all jurisdictions are having to deal with this. It's not just Pleasanton. In looking at, right now we're working on a project with Stop Waste where we're actually trying to figure out how much material we could apply within the city limits on open space. We're doing this whole GIS mapping project right now. We're looking at tree wells, how we can, how much, how deep. And then it's not just procuring that, but also how do we apply it? It's going to cost money to more equipment to apply the material and staff to apply it. So that's why it's going to cost us so much to do that. So
can I just jump in real fast as well? This is an annual number too. Annual 6,500 tons of mulch, right? Metric tons of mulch, Becky?
Yeah, or a combination of mulch
or combination thereof.
Right.
So, and you can't apply it to synthetic fields, right? So I'll stop there.
So is it like shredded, bark, or is it fertilizer?
That's the mulch. So that's the mulch piece. And then the compost is actually what we use to amend soil. It's used for carbon farming. So, we're looking at all those opportunities. We do use compost and mulch to treat our parks and golf course, but the immense quantity is what is the challenge that we're required.
Here's a wild idea for you. If the city has to purchase it, why don't you guys reach out to all the HOAs and offer the mulch for free if HOAs tear out their grass that takes water? And then you give them the mulch, they tear out their thirsty grass, they use less water, you get rid of it, they use less water, everybody wins.
That's a great idea. Jill, you asked if we can sell it. My understanding, and this piece of it is very complex, my understanding is no. The city has to procure it, we cannot resell it.
If I may also just jump in real fast. Stop Waste did an analysis as to whether, as Becky has mentioned, the quantity of mulch versus other materials. And just for the price, bang for the buck, the mulch is the best. But as everyone probably here is very astutely aware, all cities must comply statewide, right? So the market and the quantity available, as Becky has implied, is a significant factor. So
it'll drive the cost up for sure. There'll be a lot of, yeah. Mark, you had a question?
Well, more of an observation.
Sure.
The law was passed years ago in anticipation that implementation was going to be a real challenge. And here we are, faced with having to comply. And what you're touching on regarding the mulch and organics or the compost is that in the state of California, in the last 5 years, I'm not aware of any composting facilities that have been approved.
Correct.
So the city is required to procure something that is not being produced. It's just so, and that's not just the city of Pleasanton. So I think that it's a well-intended law. I love, in particular, the food recovery portion of it because it's such a waste to when there's so much need in the community for edible waste, I'll call it. But the real challenge we're going to have is figuring out a way to incent people to invest the significant millions of dollars and get through the approval process to compost this material. And we just don't have it. So I applaud the city for being ahead of, trying to get in compliance. But the real challenge is that PGS can pick it up, but there's no place to put it. You can't go in the landfill and nobody's building the facilities to process the waste.
Well, and we do have, PGS did secure a long-term contract with Waste Management to take our organic material. We have 2 locations we take it to, Harvest Power and the Altamont Processing Center for composting. So in regards to being able to take our materials that they collect, we do have the processing contracts for the next 10 years. So that is good news. And we've been working on that, on procuring enough space for our organic materials since 2018. PGS has been on top of it, really working hard to get, and they got a good deal. So to get a long-term contract is a difficult thing to get, especially as you mentioned, now moving forward, getting space to process organics, it's going to be costly. And that's what's going to be challenging too. In our rate structure, we've subsidized our recycling, both mixed recycling and organics. And so I don't think people have the true cost of what it actually costs for that stream. And so they think it's free. It's going and it's making compost, but it is costly to process. Yeah.
I understand how you turn it in. You have a question, Bill? No? Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Steve, this is John Sensible. I have a question.
Sure, thank you, John. Go ahead.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for your presentation this morning. I appreciate it. From a volunteer at the hospital perspective, have you been in touch with anybody from the hospital? This is going to apply to us, I believe.
I haven't talked to them specifically about this, no. But I'm
Okay.
happy to, if you had someone that I can speak to, I'd be happy to reach out.
Well, I've got a board meeting coming up. I'm going to bring it up and I'll have somebody reach out to you. Thanks, Becky.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Becky.
Becky, I got a comment.
Oh, Herb, go ahead, then I'll get Reed next.
Yeah, Becky, thank you. You're amazing. I just, this is the most depressing presentation I've seen this morning.
I'm so sorry.
I get frustrated because it just seems like the mandates have come out. The mandates have come out before they've even figured out what they're going to do with it. And if you can't build facilities and you're mandating all these regulations, it just seems like it's anti incentive in a way. And I know you're the messenger and you're doing a great job, but it's just frustrating to see at least $1 million a year to spend, and we're not sure what we're going to do with the product. And it seems like it seems like it's about 10 years too early to come out with this, but I know there's nothing we can do about it. So the city has to do something, but I would encourage and hope that somehow we spin the presentation to be more about here's the positives of what it's going to do, more than here's the regulations, here's the cost, here's the, all the bad things about what it does, just for future, because I know it's a good intention. It's just depressing to hear about it when we're not ready for it. So thanks.
Sure. Thanks for that feedback.
Reed, did you have a question?
Yeah, a couple comments. Along the lines of what John was talking about with regard to doing the presentation for the hospital people, there is an organization in the Tri-Valley of restaurant owners, and this would be super, super valuable for them to hear. A 7:30 in the morning meeting is not going to work for restaurateurs, probably,
Sure.
but they meet either once every other week or once every month at 3 o'clock on a Monday. So Steve, I'd be happy to work with you to get a time, and I could reach out to Todd from Sidebar, who kind of is in charge of this organization, or he's the boots on the ground for sure. So that's a thought, because all of us in food service need to learn about this. We have been using the program. We've been required to use the program. We're happy to use the program. We believe in the program. I'm sure that people will figure out where to put the waste, because if it's a mandate, we're going to have to figure that out. I was wondering if you had any of these great interns who would maybe like to work paid, and they could come and experience what it's like to actually do the separation and see how a big volume operation works, because I need staff and I'll pay them. So hook me up with any good kids.
Hey, Reed, we had Jill Buck and her people come over to Black Tie, and they did an amazing job and really kind of set us on a course and a path that has helped us over the last couple of years reduce our waste and be better citizens to Pleasanton and all. So they've done a great job. You love them at your place too. They're energetic and care, and Jill drives them, and it's awesome. You get a great report, and they're just nice people.
And Bill, I think you had a question about processing.
Well, I guess I might have missed it in
Comment?
that presentation, Becky, but so what's the process to get this waste to a point where it can be mulch, where they can then be distributed? And that, I know we're talking about processing plants, but does that mean we're going to truck all this waste someplace, process it, and then we're required to bring it back and distribute it? And how does it get to a point where it's sanitary, correct, to be able to sell to HOAs to get rid of their grass and lawn to replace as mulch?
Right. Well, we already are disposing of the materials and have the contracts in place to do that. The procurement piece is the city's going to be required to now procure materials to bring into our community doesn't mean it will be the materials that we've produced and been
Got it.
processed.
Got it.
So ideally, it would be great for us to buy our own compost back, but I'm not sure how practical that's going to be. We'll have to wait and see.
Thank you, Becky. As always, do a
Sure.
fantastic job for the city.
And going back to what Herb said, the positive of this, the big picture positive is this is a climate action bill. And, you know, we've been working on our climate action plan. And SB 1383 is an existing activity in the plan, and it will help us. It is one of the main objectives in the plan that is going to help us meet our 2045 carbon neutrality target. And so it is a very important component for our climate action plan, and especially with the most recent report out by the UN, it's timely, it's important, and you know, in messaging to our community, yes, big picture, this is the why. It will help us move the needle the fastest by doing it.
Mhm.
And you know, because we've already had a form of mandatory recycling in our community, we're not as far behind as other communities in the state who still only have garbage and have no other streams that they're using. So it'll be a heavy lift, but we already have some infrastructure and behaviors in place that will help us to comply. So hopefully it won't be too overwhelming for our residents and our commercial businesses.
This is John Sensiba again. Becky, thanks. I think I have one very small positive, but last Wednesday we had a barbecue for about 400 people at the Alameda County Fairgrounds for the 100 Club. And at the end of the night, you know, we had 450 RSVPs, so we had a lot of food left over. And there was really no answer for what to do with this perfectly good food. Super frustrating. And if I understand correctly, large venues like that will have to have a contract with somebody to be able to take that food and see that I think that's super positive, because there's so much of that goes on.
Yeah, so that requirement will start in 2024. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We work with Open Heart Kitchen. Now, since the pandemic, I don't know if we have actively started back up. I mean, unfortunately, there's so many requirements from a food safety perspective. Also with regard to volume. I mean, Open Heart is not going to come and pick up a half of a hotel pan of something. You've got to have enough for it to be able to be put into their cycle of their menus. So, but they're an awesome organization, and they just hired a new person in charge of raising money. So maybe they will be able to help all of us in this.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Thank you so much, Becky. I thought your presentation was great. And as Herb said, it's just a big lift, like you mentioned. So hopefully we can get there. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording and appreciate you joining us today. Where is it? Stop video. No, that's not it. Oh, I'm trying to find it. Here we go. Stop recording.